Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off talking about a German tank gun. Well, I say tank gun, it's more like a tank with anti-aircraft guns on it, so not quite the same. But we're now on to... Oh boy, if it wants to... Okay, 1 second, I'm just trying to get that, there we go. The Desert Fox reviews his troops, June 1942. And we'll just have a picture of the Mr. Devil's Fox, Erwin Rommel. Headache for the Allies. Oh boy, it really doesn't want to. I am so sorry. I'm trying to get it to, there we go. This is what you're going to have to get. Headache for the, Headache for the Allies. In February 1941, after brilliant success in Europe, Lieutenant General Erwin Rommel was sent to Africa to head the Africa Corps. Following the rout of the Italians by the British, he began a counterattack that covered 1,125 miles in 2 months and drove the British back to the Egyptian border. Early in 1942, he was made a field marshal and, after a successful campaign, was finally checked by General Sir Bernard, there we go, Bernard Montgomery at El Alamein, and driven out of Africa. This photograph of the Marshal was taken from a German prisoner captured by 5th Army forces in Italy. Rommel's record on the European continent and in Africa made him one of the outstanding generals of the war. Practically obscure before the start of hostilities in 1939, his first great success was scored during the conquest of France. It was the mechanized divisions under Rommel that breached the French line in the Sedan sector and made the famous drive towards the English Channel. This operation cut off the British and Belgian from the French army and made the evacuation of Dunkirk imperative. After he was sent to Africa, Rommel's reputation grew at an even great pace. During early 1942, he was practically unbeatable. One of his quirks was a habit of entertaining captured English officers. During these seances, I think that's what it means, or scenes, I'm not sure. He took considerable pleasure in lecturing them on military tactics and pointing out to them the mistakes which caused their downfall. In 1943, Rommel nearly accomplished the supreme objective of driving a wedge to the Suez Canal, a task almost which the Italians had embarked in 1940, which with little success against the British. Yes, so obviously, anyone who knows about World War II knows about Erwin Rommel. And yes, he is kind of mythologized by the British and the Americans. One of the reasons for this is because they wanted to make it... They kind of wanted to make it seem like, oh, look, this really great general, well, he wasn't actually as evil. Like they said, well, because, one thing is, he wasn't a member of the Nazi Party. He just wasn't. But he didn't necessarily disagree with some of the things Hitler thought. So, while he wasn't, he wasn't necessarily a great person. But there's also this thing that happens after the war called the Clean Wehrmacht. And the idea was, well, the Wehrmacht, they weren't really that bad. They didn't do anything bad. Everything that was bad was done by the SS and another group that I can't think of right now. But the SS, mainly. And the reason for this was because, after World War II is, right, the Cold War starts not long after. And so they needed the Germans to feel like, hey, look, you guys are still allowed to be here, They needed the commanders from this war to help them in the Cold War, if a war broke out between the Soviet Union and the West. So, this clean Wehrmacht, and one of the benefactors of the clean Wehrmacht myth is Erwin Rommel, who does obviously kill himself later on, because while I don't think he really wanted to kill Hitler, I said his name there. I don't usually, but I don't think he wanted to kill him. He did apparently have some information on it, and so when it plays out and they find out he didn't say anything, he's given the option to commit suicide so that his family is spared, which is honorable. But yeah, he's definitely not the greatest person in the German army, or the nicest, or anything like that. But he was a good general, to say the least, and it does seem like he maybe did care about his troops and actually cared about Germany. So it would have been an interesting world if Erwin Rommel lived till after the war. What part he would have played after the war? It would have been interesting. Artillery duel in the Western Desert, June 1942. Action at long range. In the picture at top, British artillery are shown shelling enemy positions during the push against the Axis in Libya. While below, British soldiers manning a 6-pounder duck for a moment in the midst of loading their gun as an enemy shell lands close by. So yeah, obviously, yeah, artillery, just like the First World War, plays a huge part in this war. Not as much as the First World War. The First World War, definitely, artillery is way more important, but artillery still plays an important role in this war as well. Yeah, the artillery in World War I is crazy, the amount that they used. Holding out and fighting back at Tobruk, June 1942. A gallant defense nears its end. Besieged for months by Axis forces, the British garrison at Tobruk not only held out comfortably, but continually strengthened its defenses. With the harbor accessible to British merchants and naval vessels, the stronghold remained a deterrent and threat to Axis columns intent on driving on towards the Suez. On December 10th, 1941, however, Axis columns smashed through, and one of the greatest sieges in the history of the world ended. The British first captured this Libyan fortress and seaport in their 1941 drive, when the Italian garrison of 25,000 surrendered on January 22nd. Subsequently, the Axis staged a counteroffensive, and from mid-April until December 10th, 1941, the British Imperial garrison, made up largely of Australians, withstood a German-Italian siege. The weary defenders were relieved when they... The weary defenders were relieved when the British, in their second drive across North Africa, pushed the Axis forces westward across Libya. The second siege of Tobruk lasted only 4 days. The port of 33,000 British prisoners falling to Marshal Rommel on June 21st, 1942. In one of the war's outstanding upsets. The above pictures show British soldiers at Tobruk manning an anti-aircraft gun girt by Italian ammunition boxes filled with stone. Yeah, so, we've heard of sandbags, so here we go, just put boxes full of stones. I mean, it's not a terrible defense. The stones will, at least a lot of small arms fire. It'll obviously block that. Large arm fire, it might slightly slow it down, but like if a tank shot its shell at this, Those boxes of stones aren't really going to be the most defensible, but they'll at least be better than nothing. That's what matters. And then this will be the last page for today. Accurate bombing from high above the desert. June 1942. Trouble for the Axis. A dispersed ammunition dump in Libya is bombed by aircraft on the South African Air Force, which played a conspicuous role through many campaigns during the British activity in the Western Desert. The hits can be seen clearly. Yeah, you can see. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, those are pretty good hits, and they are very straight-line-ish. But yeah, there's a lot of the aircraft plays a huge role in this war. In the First World War, it did have a decent role, but not like in this war. This war is a war of the air, a lot, as much as it is a war of the ground. If you had air superiority, you more than likely, your ground forces are going to kind of win because you can just bomb the enemy out of existence. So, like, the role of artillery in the First World War is kind of the role of what aircraft takes in this war, where it's super important. And even if your ground forces can't necessarily take a place, if your artillery in the First World War or your aircraft in this war are able to, well, then your ground forces will just be able to push through the enemy, more or less. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a comment. Tell me what I could improve on. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.